Welcome wildlings, Colin here, the Wild CEO for another Ancestral Mind video. Today's video, I'm gonna talk about why I'm moving more to a carnivore-based diet in my own personal life. This is gonna give you a perspective on something that in some cases might seem extreme. I don't actually consider it extreme at all. There's a lot of reasons for this. There's a lot of other videos on this. I'm gonna keep today's video short just to kind of give you an intro to why the carnivore diet might be something that you might wanna try, at least as something you could do sometimes, maybe change the seasons, maybe to mix it up, maybe as a weight loss or an elimination protocol for 30 to 60 or 90 days. For me, I find myself leaning more to eating really quality meat, and I just find my body responding better to it. I find my fat loss goals, getting rid of some of this midsection laziness that I built up over being stressed and eating too much sugar while we had our son, shedding that, getting down to about 5 to 6% body fat, which is what I'm aiming for right now, and why I'm using a carnivore-based approach to do that. So I will aim for a 5 to 7 minute video, and we're gonna get into, what the carnivore diet is, why I'm leaning towards this myself, and I would just say this is probably gonna serve as an intro to the carnivore diet. And a disclaimer should be, though, that, again, this is not nutrition or medical advice. This is purely entertainment, blah, blah, blah. I'm also offering my opinion. I'm also offering what is working for me right now. Okay, this could change in the future. Who knows? So let's get right into it. All right, first things first, why a carnivore diet? Why eating so much meat? Hasn't all the research been done showing that meat is bad for us? No. In fact, there has never been a controlled study that has proven that meat is bad for human health. There has only been epidemiological studies. That's a confusing word for most people. Most people don't know what that means. It means observational, right? And all they do in these studies, most of the time, and almost all of them actually, all the research that was ever done that pointed to meat having a correlation to health outcomes, not even saying that meat is responsible. There was just these very loose correlations that maybe people that ate this much meat got these health issues, whatever. And even within that, the studies themselves were very biased and in a lot of cases bad, like the seven, I think it was 7-country study, whatever Ancestral study was, the 7 countries, the heart health. It was actually like 13 to 20 countries he studied, but he dropped out the countries that didn't support what he wanted to find. And he published it with only the countries where he could connect a correlation to the saturated fat and cholesterol being connected to heart disease or longevity, shorter life, etc. Just goes to show you. And Ancestral was one of the main people that was responsible for the whole fat is bad dogma that has infiltrated our country and our society and our pop culture, and literally, in my opinion, resulted in the deaths of millions of people prematurely because they were told by their doctors to not eat red meat. And the reality is, most of them probably should have been eating red meat and should have not been eating the grains and the sugar and the other refined crap. Epidemiological research is usually done with a questionnaire. Okay, let me say that again, because this is very, very important to this whole idea of how I feed my son meat. I'm going to eat a lot of meat in my life, and I would not do either of those things if I thought it was going to have a long-term negative health consequence, right? I have no issue whatsoever. I'm not even 1% concerned. That's not just because of what I'm about to tell you about epidemiological research. It's a mouthful, isn't it? It's also all the other things I've done and testing myself, N=1, etc. If you went to high school like me in the United States and you took a test, they had this thing called a scantron, where you had to use a certain number 2 pencil, and you couldn't go outside the lines. I guess they would just feed the paper into this machine that would then spit out, whether you got a good score or not based on what the right or not right answers were. I've seen some of these scantron questionnaires that they've shown that some of these studies have used. An example was one from Brian, sapien.org, who was on our podcast recently on the Ancestral Mind, find on iTunes or Google or Spotify. One of the questions that he mentioned was, this is an actual question. It was, how many cups of ribs have you had over the past year? Or maybe it was 6 months or whatever. Gave you maybe multiple choice, 1 a day or 1 a week, 2 a day or a week, 3 days. Are you kidding me? This is what is passed as research in nutrition. And it's why the entire landscape for USDA recommendations, for what doctors recommend, for what the public thinks is right, is completely and utterly broken and wrong and backwards, and it's just a bunch of lies, to be honest. That's all I'm gonna get into about that. But again, I will just say, research done through polling, through sending questionnaires to people, right? And you'll even know if they got all the questionnaires from the sample size completed. You don't know if they lost some data or left out some data. Like, there is so much wrong with having research that is going to connect something that is very complex like diet and nutrition and time to a piece of paper and somebody writing on that piece of paper. Like, it's so absurd on so many levels. It shouldn't be called research. It shouldn't be allowed to be called research, but it is. There has never been a controlled study that has proven that meat is bad. That's all I'll say about that. For me, I find myself going through this evolution of my thoughts around food. I love steak. I like chicken. I like fish. I like a lot of foods. I like vegetables. I like fruit. Hell, I love bread. I love grains. I love all food. I'm a foodie. But for a health perspective, for my current goals right now, and also I've connected eliminating, dairy, eliminating grains, sugar, things like that when I'm eating at home more often than eating out. Also, my allergies are better. My back doesn't hurt as much. In fact, my back pain in the past 2 weeks has been almost non-existent. And I had a major flare-up before that when I was sick. And my back one day was killing me to the point where I went to the chiropractor twice, 2 different places to get some relief. I iced it, everything. It was really bad. And I haven't had anything since then, knock on wood. And I've been eating primarily carnivore, eating mostly at home. I had some custard recently. I haven't had any grains, no pizza, nothing. And I feel awesome. And it's really incredible. The reason I'm kind of in my diet, as opposed to just eating at home and eating sweet potatoes and a lot of vegetables and things like this, is the reason I'm leaning more towards carnivore is because it's simpler, right? Simplicity for sure. And I have a very complex life with a million things going on. There are certain plants that I think do affect me. I haven't really spent a lot of time kind of diagnosing those, but something about plants that most people don't understand, and it's really all I'll talk about in today's video, are 99%, and the research has been done with this, where a scientist actually looked at the average diet and he looked at what the plant toxins were in the plants themselves, and then compare that to the plant toxins that farmers use on, let's say, conventional agriculture or even organic agriculture, because they spray as well. 99% of the toxin load from pesticides that you and I consume, 99% of those on like a year, for example, is going to come from the plants themselves. Oxalates, phytates, anti-nutrients, all these things that attack your biology, especially the gut. These are things that plants have designed to defend themselves. If you have poison berries, well, you eat that one time and no one's going back to eat that. No animal, no human, like, you will remember that. Plants can't run away. They can only create toxins through chemistry to defend themselves, right? So everyone talks about gluten. Gluten is one of the major plant defenses. It's a pesticide, basically. It's a pesticide to humans. We really shouldn't be eating it. 99% of the pesticides from even an organic produce is inside the plants themselves. It's not sprayed on by humans. It's inside the plant. That is a very, very startling and sombering statistic that really changed my mind on it. I used to eat spinach a lot, and even when I would cook it down, let alone raw spinach, and I would never feel good afterwards. That's the oxalates. I remember soaking some cashews to remove, I believe, the phytates, and I forgot to drain the cashews, and I made a cashew milk where I basically blended the water that was soaking the cashews in together to make a cashew milk, basically. You're supposed to drain the first soaking, right? Because that gets all the phytates out. I felt like crap afterwards. These are all examples of how the plant kingdom has things, mechanisms, chemistry to defend itself and how it affects humans. And everyone thinks plants are just universally perfect or great or whatever, and they're not. There's a lot of plants that really mess people up. There's people that have autoimmune issues, like Michaela Peterson, for example. Jordan Peterson's daughter, who came on the Ancestral Mind about 2 weeks ago. Her show's out. Go to the Ancestral Mind, check it out. She can literally only eat meat, salt, and water, like red meat, ruminant meat, salt, and water, because she even tried when she was eliminating she ate like 7 olives this one day. And her symptoms, which is usually a 20-day trajectory of like pain, depression, etc., all these things like back pain, flare-ups, joints, arthritis, 21 days from 7 olives destroyed her. And she just kind of was like, I literally can't eat anything. Now, again, that's a very sensitive autoimmune case, very sensitive to certain foods. But it does show you that even if you have that on the extreme, what about everyone in the middle, right? You and I in the middle, we may not respond that negatively, but we probably respond leaky gut, maybe our allergies, maybe rashes here and there, maybe our bowel movements and our digestion isn't great. These are all ways that plants affect us. So the number one thing to focus on with this is that plants attack humans. They almost always universally, every plant in nature has some mechanism in place to attack you and other predators, animals, let's say, that would eat it. That's just the first principle. It's unavoidable. So everyone thinks like a green, it's just pure nutrition. It goes in and it does all these magical things in your body and it's perfect and you're great and you can feel good about yourself. Nothing could be further from the truth. Now, what's really funny and ironic about this is there are certain animal foods, especially when they're prepared in a certain way and the animals are raised in a certain way and treated a certain way. There are certain foods that can go in your body and do what everyone thinks plants do. Magic, pure health, promotion, amazingness, right? Like an example of a wild venison steak or liver or a really good humanely raised grass-fed steak from a cow that's cooked in a very specific way. These are the foods that are actually the purest health foods for humans. And people don't understand that. Like, I mean, I can't say fatty fish because of so much of the toxins in our oceans, but before humans started polluting our seas and our waterways, I would say that fatty fish would have been one of the most nutritious foods in conjunction with any of the big game animals we could have found that roamed naturally in the wild, whether it was bison or buffalo or mammoths or whatever. Those would have been the most nutritious foods for human beings. Now, even deeper within the animal, the actual most nutritious foods are organ meats. Hands down, nothing comes close. Oysters might come close, but they don't really have organs, but you're eating the whole animal, and oysters are some of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. You know, sardines, small fatty fish are also as well. But then you have like beef liver and even brain and heart and sweetbreads and all these things. Those are the most nutritious foods on the planet. After that are going to be really clean, pure, fatty cuts of meat. As long as the animal's treated well, especially if it was a wild animal, it's going to have a really perfect omega balance, omega-3 to omega-6. It's going to be good for you. It's going to be full of vitamins, full of nutrients, etc. What is constantly circulating in my mind as I think about nutrition is I know these plant stuffs are going to have some kind of chemical load that my body's going to have to process out. I know, again, for the most part, because obviously we have a modern food industry, there are certain things that happen with meat. There can be toxins, there can be things, but either way, the natural growth of the animals themselves are a far cry from what plants do because plants have to protect themselves internally. Animals, on the other hand, have other defense mechanisms like their claws or camouflage or running away, right? So they don't have to develop through chemistry, the same defenses as plants do inside their being. And this is why you have this dichotomy that people don't really understand. It's almost a paradox for most people. Animals that are clean, healthy, and treated well are the number one health food for humans. Period. Those are kind of that's just the overview, right? There's so much to go into this. There's other channels you can look at. Check out the Food Lies. Sean Baker talks about Meat Heals. He's got a website, Meat Heals, some good stuff. A lot of people are talking about this. It's not really a new concept, but it's picking up a little bit in popularity. And it's something that has just shifted my mind a little bit on how I think about food. I've always been pro animal rights and humanely treating animals and humanely slaughtering them. And we need much more of that. We need small farmers that do things the right way, like Bill out here in Austin, who I get my grass-fed beef from. We need more of that. That's an overview of how to kind of think about plants versus animals. Now, the second thing is we just moved to the country. I got 10 acres outside of Austin. I have some weight loss goals. I want to get very, very, very lean. I want to kind of get down to a baseline of the leanest I've ever been and then really see what I can do from there. Maybe I want to bulk a little bit. Maybe I want to find equilibrium where I can have, my ice cream once a week because I freaking love ice cream. I love custard. It's just like my favorite food. It's like vanilla ice cream is the perfect freaking food. I'm sorry, it is. It's the perfect food for flavor. It's not the perfect food for health. We all know that, okay? You have keto, which is low carb. It's based on balancing your hormones. It's based on keeping insulin low so that your body can then go to fat stores, adipocytes, create ketone bodies, right, which is fat burning, and your body then uses that as fuel. To get very lean, I'm using a very low carb approach. High protein, high fat, very low carb. Now, without going into a huge discussion on this, like check out some of my other videos, even some recent ones I put out on this, without going into a huge thing on this, that is the most effective, fastest, and most natural way for a human to lose body fat is to use a very low carb, even ketogenic style eating plan with a moderate to medium amount of protein and a healthy amount of fat. And even protein and fat, you can fluctuate. Some people will do better on more protein, some less. I'm definitely more on the pro-protein side. I think a lot of people are afraid of it for reasons that aren't justified. In fact, if you look at a lot of the research that was done about meat in general, there's also a lot of bad research done with protein consumption. There's a lot of really loosely, poorly connected correlations done by this epidemiological research, and it's garbage, right? Let's just like recap, because I probably need more videos on this. This is a very, very quick intro to why I'm going carnivore, or at least leaning towards carnivore. Some days I might have some rice. Sometimes I might have a little bit more carbs and some sweet potatoes. I'm gonna mix it up, right? But what I'm doing generally is every meal is gonna focus on a really nutrient-dense piece of animal protein, if fatty cut when I can, whether that's salmon, sardines, grass-fed steak right now is I'm on a kick for that for sure. And then having very, very small amount of anything on the side. Like if I do some greens, I'll do like a butter lettuce salad with like a homemade shallot vinaigrette. That's kind of like my go-to right now, is something like that with the steak. So I'm not saying like I'm 100% carnivore, I'm not eating greens. It's just the amount of calories and the amount of greens I am eating, or the amount of vegetables or plants, if you will. It's just very, very low. Like I could make a salad with some onions for the sulfur, some butter lettuce because it's my favorite lettuce, do a little shallot vinaigrette with some fat, and I'm looking at like 5 grams of carbs right next to my steak, which is purely fat and protein. If you want to lose weight, though, that's what you do. Hands down, bar none, nothing comes close. Of course, sleep and stress have to be mitigated and controlled. Getting sunlight, that's another big one for fat loss. But that's fundamentally why I'm leaning towards carnivore diet. And there's a lot of different things to unpack here. If you have any questions or comments below, like I will be happy to answer them. I'll be happy to do more videos on this. I'll be happy to point you in some other directions of other videos and podcasts and things you can watch or listen to. But I also noticed, kind of to close this out, that I just feel better when I do this. And I think it's because a meat-based diet is the most evolutionary appropriate representation of how our ancestors would have lived for hundreds of thousands of years. And to close that out, there's a quote that I remember. It was an anthropologist was asking a group of hunter-gatherers he was studying. And he asked them about their eating preference and what foods they like to eat and how they eat plants and bugs and all these different things. And the quote that stuck out with me, it's a really good one. He said something to the effect of, "We'll eat plants when there's no real food available." Think about that. We'll eat plants when there's no real food available. What do you think he meant by real food? He meant animal products. All right, so like and subscribe. Let me know what you think below. Hit that thumbs up. Share this with a friend. I really got this message that I want to help people with. And if you look at some of my other videos, it's all in the spirit of helping people understand their biology, helping people understand a lot of the food misconceptions and lies and dogmas and things they've been fed, and helping people take control of their own health. And, carnivore is one way to do that. You could do a paleo diet, a primal diet, a keto diet. You could have a little bit more higher carb. You could have, a little bit more moderate, high carb, low fat. Like there's all these different things that you can do. And I want to bring awareness to those things. So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.